it's my pleasure to introduce Simon. Simon will talk about the ZAP attack proxy. You can just see that there are slightly change between the content and the title from the conference brochure, but Simon will make some announcements on the new version of ZAP and some other stuff, interesting stuff. So I give the floor to Simon. So please, Simon.
Hi folks, how are you doing? Right, my name is Simon Bennetts. I'm the project lead for the OWASP ZAP attack proxy, and I'm a member of the Mozilla security team. Right, my plan is to first give a quick introduction to ZAP for people who don't know it very well. Then I want to spend a little bit longer talking about the latest version of ZAP, which is 2.4.0. And after that, I want to talk about stuff which is coming later, which is unusual because I don't normally talk about things we're going to do as opposed to things we've already done. So first, a couple of questions for you. Has anyone here used ZAP? Ooh, a lot of you. That's great. And how many of you used the latest version, 2.4.0? A lot fewer. So, right. Update, please update. And I'll show you why in a minute. So, very quickly, what is ZAP? And I'll now start my timer, which I completely forgot to do. So, what is ZAP? ZAP is a tool for finding vulnerabilities in web applications. So it is a hacking tool. It is completely free and open source, like all OWASP projects. And it is an OWASP flagship project. So the flagship projects are the ones which are most mature and most suitable for people to adopt. And people have been telling me that ZAP is becoming better known, and I think some people are telling me it's becoming as well known as the OWASP top 10 now, which is very good news. I can't verify that, but that's the impression, but that's what people are telling me. So it is a tool that is intended to be ideal for beginners. That's how I started ZAP. I was definitely a beginner myself, and I wanted to learn about application security. And we still want to make sure it is a really good tool for beginners, but it's also being used a lot by security professionals. So actually trying to go for the whole range from beginners right up to the pros. But it's also ideal for developers and functional testers, especially for automated security tests. I'm not going to talk about that a lot this time, but I'll be mentioning it, and I've mentioned it, and I'll talk about it in other talks. And apparently in one of the DevOps tracks later on this afternoon, someone's talking about this kind of thing and mentioning ZAP a lot, which is great. It is included in all the major security distributions like Kali, and it's been the top 1 or 2 in the ToolsWatch top security tools of the last couple of years, which is really good. And as of May, it's now on the ThoughtWorks technology radar, which is really great. So they're saying that all businesses should be evaluating ZAP to see how well it can work in their business. But of course, I should always mention that, as I'm sure you all know, in the security business, there are no silver bullets, so ZAP certainly isn't one of those. So we do have some principles, which makes us a little bit different from some commercial projects. It is free, open source, as I've mentioned before. And I want to stress this, and I want to stress that there is no pro version, there will never be a pro version. And one of the reasons I stress that is ZAP is very much a community project. We actively want people to get involved. It is all about learning about security, and you can do that by using ZAP. You'd also learn about security by getting involved and actually making changes and enhancing and seeing how ZAP works and going, well, this could work better, and learning that way. So, and one of the reasons I always stress there'll be no pro version is so that if you contribute to ZAP, then we won't take your hard work and go, oh, thank you very much, we'll now sell this. We're not going to do that. It is cross-platform, so all you need is Java 7, so it will run on all the main platforms. I've even got it running on a Raspberry Pi, so it wasn't that fast, but it still worked. And we aim it to be easy to use. Now, there are some caveats here. Security by nature is not exactly obvious and intuitive. So a security tool will never be completely obvious and completely easy to use, but we aim to make it as easy to use as possible. And that's not only for beginners, even as I learn more and more, I still want the tools I use to be easy and intuitive and to help me. But that means that if you have problems with ZAP, with usability problems with ZAP, then please report them, and we treat usability issues just as seriously as functional issues. And it's easy to install as well. I've played with a lot of security tools, and some of them are such a complete nightmare with all the dependencies and things. You know, actually getting them up and running can be very difficult. And you know, we try and make sure that ZAP, all you need is Java 7, and then you can get ZAP running. And the Mac version actually comes with Java 7, so it's very straightforward. It is internationalized, and again, this is very unusual for security tools, including commercial ones, so it is completely internationalized, and it is fully documented. There's another caveat with that. The documentation has mostly been written by the developers, including myself, and you know, we're not technical authors, so the documentation could definitely be better, but there's a lot of documentation around. We have a user guide, which is included with ZAP, and that's also online. We just do some processing on that, so it keeps in step. And there's a lot of information on the wiki, but yes, there's still a lot of things we could and should document and document better. We aim at ZAP to work well with other tools. We know ZAP isn't the be-all and end-all, so we try and make sure that we can interact with tools, we can launch tools, and other tools can use ZAP. So that's very important for us, and we're very happy to make changes to make that easier. Even if it doesn't directly benefit ZAP, the fact that we're working with other tools and other tools are using us is definitely a benefit. So if you're trying to use ZAP, integrating with other tools, and you have problems, let us know, and we'll try and help out. And also we try and reuse well-regarded components. So we don't reinvent the wheel unless we actually have to. You know, we want to take really good open source out there and reuse it rather than maintaining our own version. But we will do that, and in some cases we've created new things and we've made them into components that other tools can use. In some cases we've actually deliberately licensed them so that they can be used by commercial tools. So reuse is very important, both that we reuse things and that other people can reuse the stuff we generate. Some statistics for you. So ZAP is nearly 5 years old, so it's getting there. And the most recent release, 2.4.0, we released last month, and I just checked this morning, that's been downloaded more than 32,000 times, which isn't too bad in 1 month. And that's direct downloads as opposed to tools like Kali updated very quickly. So people using ZAP through Kali will have pulled that down from the Kali repos rather than ours. It is being translated into 30 languages. Actually, I think it's 31 now, and I just got an email from somebody else this morning saying they'd like to translate it into another language, which is really great. So we'll be 32 soon, and we've got over 130 translators. So that's something I'm really proud of and something I think is really great. And that's a very important thing. We want contributions in all aspects, whether it's documentation, translating, so it's not just code contributions we're interested in. Testing, all these things are really great. And I'm not sure about this, but I kind of get the impression it's actually mostly professional pen testers using it. I could be wrong. It's difficult for us to know exactly who's using it. But based on the feedback we get and some of the issues that are raised, I'm guessing it's pro pen testers, but maybe it's just that the developers and QA people are finding it does exactly what they need. I'm not sure. And finally, I don't see this so much, but I used to see something saying, oh, ZAP's just a fork of Paros. I did some quick calculations, and the version that we release, so 2.4.0, not including all the stuff on the marketplace, only 20% of that is the original Paros code, and 80% is new ZAP code. Got a few more statistics for you. So there's a site called OpenHub, and ZAP is counted as very high activity on there, so it's actually right up there with the Linux kernel and Firefox. So it is very active. It's the most active OWASP project on there. Apparently we've had 60 code contributors, 31 of whom are active. So we take the translators and all the evangelists, we've got over 200 contributors, which I think is really great. And apparently it took 347 years of effort. I'm not quite sure how they calculate that. I'm sure I haven't done any more than 100 years on it myself. So, last thing I want to go through on the introduction is some use cases. We want to make sure that ZAP can be used in as many different ways as possible, whatever works for you really. So you can use it as a point-and-shoot tool. You just enter a URL and it'll go and it'll spider the site and then do the active and passive scanning. This works very well unless you've got something like authentication, in which case you're going to be hitting the login page. So obviously there are some restrictions to that. What we tend to recommend is proxying via ZAP, so exploring the web application manually with your browser proxying through ZAP, so you can explore the application and you can put sensible values. You can explore, hopefully the application is designed for humans, so you'll understand it, and you'll understand it more as you explore it, and you'll then teach ZAP about it, and the better you explore the application, the better ZAP can scan it. So manual proxying and then scanning is a very good step. Obviously, we've got the manual pen testing, so pro pen testers, that's just a starting point. After that, there's loads of manual tools to play around things. If you're doing professional pen testing, you want to automate as much as possible so you can concentrate your manual effort and your brain power on the things that automated scanners like ZAP just can't find. But I also think automated security regression tests are a very important aspect of ZAP. So this is where, instead of having somebody sitting there and exploring the application, you use your your regression tests to explore your application. So this is something you can actually include in your continuous integration. So you do all your functional tests, proxying those through ZAP, you get your functional testing, and then ZAP can do security regression testing on top of that. And if you do that as part of continuous integration, it means, within minutes or hours of someone actually committing a change, you can get an alert saying there's now a cross-site scripting vulnerability because someone forgot to escape one variable on a web page. So that's, and the sooner we can catch these vulnerabilities, the better. You can actually use ZAP as a debugger. So I've used that, when you're playing around with JavaScript libraries or WebSockets. If you're having problems when you're developing a website and you want to see what's going on, you can use ZAP. And if you're finding out you're sending the wrong thing, you can change things mid-flight, whether it's WebSockets, or you can even do it with some of the client-side messages as well, rather than actually go and change the code and recompile and redeploy. You can actually go, well, I'll just change it on the fly and make sure I get it right. Then when it's working, okay, then you can change the code and go from there. So that's very important. And also, I've said before, ZAP isn't the be-all and end-all, and there are quite a few tools. There's a growing number of tools, including things like ThreadFix and Minion, which have a wider scope than just scanning individual web applications, and they make use of ZAP very heavily. So this is a very important use case for us. So what I'd like to do now is talk about the latest version of ZAP 2.4.0. And rather than just talk about it, I think I'll try and show you some of the things. So this is ZAP. And if you haven't used this version before, you'll notice that there was actually a splash screen. That's new. And there are some tips and tricks that come up when you're in the splash screen for you to read. Unfortunately, ZAP is actually starting about half the speed it used to. So it's twice as fast to start up, and that means you don't have as much time to read the tips and tricks. You can access them via the help menu as well. Then what you get is this dialog asking you about whether you want to persist the ZAP session. We've done this because we found that a lot of people were starting up ZAP. They were then exploring the application, doing all the pen testing, and then they were saving the results at the end. Now, this isn't actually the best way to use ZAP, because what happens is ZAP stores everything it does in the database. And even if you're not persisting the session, it will store it in a database anyway, but if you choose not to persist it, that database will get trashed when you exit ZAP. When you save it or persist it, then it actually gets copied to another place. So the most efficient, the best way to use ZAP is actually to persist the session at the start, and that way, if in the unlikely event ZAP crashes or your PC crashes, then you'll actually have everything be saved up to that point. And if you save it, if you do a load of work and you find actually as thousands or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of requests, when you save the session, actually copying those files takes time. So the best thing to do is to actually save the session at the start. So we've got two options. You can say exactly where you want to save it. You can save it in the standard place with the timestamp, or you can choose not to save it at all, persist it at all. And you can later on choose to persist it. And if you have persisted it, then you can actually delete the session when you exit as well if you'd like. So that was the first thing you might have noticed. Second thing is, now I've hopefully you can read ZAP at the back. I've tried to change the resolution so it's a bit clearer. Usually I'd have it at a lower resolution so you can see more. But one thing you'll notice is there are a lot fewer tabs than there used to be. Now, don't worry, we haven't got rid of a load of functionality. But what we found is all the different tabs and options were quite intimidating to new users. And we also found that even experienced people using ZAP tended to use particular functions at one time, so they wouldn't use everything, they'd just concentrate in particular areas. And so this massive tabs didn't help at all. So what we've done is we tried to cut it down to the absolute essential, and actually normally the scripts tab isn't one of the ones which comes up, so you'd see it would be much more like that. And what you'll see is we have these magic plus icons, and these are all of the other tabs that are available, so you can go in and add any of these ones you like. And we've got a couple of buttons here. So here's a button which shows all of the tabs. So that's the full set of tabs that you get as default for 2.40. Now, that's, we've got the ZAP marketplace, the online marketplace. You can pull down loads and loads more add-ons. But we've also got another option here for hiding the unpinned tabs. And that pinning thing is important because, say, you always want the scripts tab, so you can add the script tab, and all of the tabs that aren't shown by default have this little pin icon. You can pin them, and then it doesn't matter if you show all the tabs and then hide the tabs, that the pinned ones will still stay. And what we try and do is make sure that tabs appear when required. So I do like a quick attack. If I get the right URL. Then you'll see down there the spider tab appeared, and then the active scan tab will appear. So basically the tabs appear as and when required. So we set a breakpoint, then you'll get a breakpoint tab. It's actually quite good because I noticed I was exploring a website and suddenly the WebSockets tab appeared. So it suddenly makes it much more obvious when these things happen. So that's the tabs. And the other thing you might notice is we have on the sites tree, we've got this new toolbar, and we've got context there as well. And the reason we've put context there is they're actually very important. And, oh, that's this question here. How many people here have used contexts? A few, but not very many. Right, if you've not used context with ZAP, you haven't used ZAP very much. Because contexts are very important, and they're very important because they allow us to define different characteristics of your application. So I'll have a look here. And what we can do is we can actually we've got ones for importing, exporting context. We've just got a new context dialog here. And you can still go to the sites tree and right-click on nodes to add them to the context. But what we can do them this way. I'm going to define budget as the context, and auto picks a sensible name. And one thing, so we've now got this new budget context, and you'll see it's got the little target icon, and that means it's in scope. So I can actually right-click on the context and remove from scope and add it back in. So you can do this very quickly. And if you double-click on the context, then what you'll see is you'll see all this extra information that you can actually associate with a context. So contexts are defined by sets of URLs that you can, URL patterns that you can include and exclude, but then things like the structure. So if you have things like the unusual separators, or if you have single-page applications, this is where you tell ZAP about your application, how it works. Technology. So if you actually know what technology is behind your site, then you can tell ZAP. And that's very good because you can say, right, well, we don't have, it's running on Windows. There's no point in doing injection attacks on Linux and Mac. So you can make ZAP more efficient. You can do authentication, users. There's loads of things you can actually define to do with those applications. So context is very important. That's one of the reasons we've got those there. Next thing I want to talk about is the scan dialogues. So this is how we actually launch attacks. So we've had this, there are various ways of launching attacks, but one of the standard ways is right-clicking on a node, and you've got this attack menu here. And this is, what we were finding is we were putting more and more options in this attack menu. It's getting bigger and bigger, and the combinations are getting awkward. So you'll see what we've got is, apart from the force browse, which we've still got to do, they're just single items for the main things. So if you look at the spider, then what we get, we get a dialog launched, and normally you won't see the advanced options. So what you'll see is you just have a very simple thing. We've got the starting point, If you've got multiple contexts, you can choose those there. If you've defined the context and the users, then you can actually choose which user you want to spider as. So these are, and do you want to recurse down the known nodes, so to actually use those as starting points all the way through the spider. So that's kind of the essential information. And if you're new to ZAP, this is, that's all you need, hopefully. But what you can do is you've got these advanced options, and then we go in and you can start defining loads of extra things. So, the crawl depth, exactly what, do you want to actually parse Git metadata, lots of more advanced things which allow you to tune the spider exactly how you like. And so we got those for most of the attack dialogues. So if you go something like the active scanner, again, we've got the basic stuff there. Scan policy, which I will mention very shortly, and we've got these advanced dialogues, and you can go in and you can say, right, exactly which input vectors, are the parameters you want the scanner to ignore because they're standard ones generated by a framework. Custom vectors, so you actually define exactly which strings you want to scan, and you can disable the non-custom ones. You can say, I just want to attack this string on this request. Technology again, so this overrides, if you define the technology in the context, all well and good, but then you can override it if you want to scan for one particular technology, and the policy, and which I will come to in a minute. And then we go into have a very quick look at the something like, so the Ajax spider, again, same kind of thing, very quick, we've got options like you can choose which browser you want to use now, and we've got advanced options which allow you to go in and choose exactly how many you can launch, what the crawl depth is. So the idea is what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible for people new to ZAP, not overwhelm them, but once you're comfortable with it, you can choose these advanced options and do much more fun things. And the one thing I mentioned there was scan policy. We used to have one scan policy, and now we have this scan policy manager. And the idea is the scan policy defines the active scan rules and how those work. And we've got very fine-grained control. So we have just look at the default policy here. What you'll see is you can change loads and loads of aspects about it. So you can define the threshold. And this is the threshold at which we report alerts. So you can choose to report fewer alerts, so you've got more chance of false negatives but less false positives. You can go the other way, so more chance of false positives and less false negatives. Hopefully the medium level is vaguely sensible. And then attack strength, how many attacks do you want to do? The more attacks, the more chance of finding things, but the longer thing it'll take. So you can actually choose low level, where it's something like 6 attacks per parameter per page. Medium is something like 12. High, around the 24. And we've got insane as well. And that's potentially hundreds of attacks per parameter per page. You don't want to do an insane attack on a large web app on everything. But what you can do is you can choose, actually, I don't want to do any of these in this particular policy, so turn all of those off. But if we look at injection, I just want to do parameter tampering at insane level. So you can define these policies, and these policies will, so you can have as many of those. And what you might have noticed is with the attack active scan, then what you could do is if you had the basic options, you could choose which policy you wanted, and if you go into the advanced options, then you can actually choose a policy. You can fine-tune it for that particular attack. And the last thing on this side I want to mention is a new mode. So for those of you who haven't used modes before, we have different modes, different ways that ZAP works. We have the safe mode. Safe mode's boring. Doesn't allow you to do anything nasty. That can actually be very good. So if you've got a production website and you want to see what's going on, you want to intercept things, and you just want to make sure you really don't mess things up, then use safe mode. You won't be able to do anything bad, but you can still see what's going on. So that's very useful for that. Then we have protected mode, and this is probably the best one for most people to use most of the time, or it used to be anyway. And protected mode, you can't do anything bad until you define something that's in scope. So if we have a look, if I go into protected mode now, and if I right-click the top node, you'll see that all of these things are grayed out. Whereas if I go to budget, because that's in scope, you can now do bad things. So that's protected mode. That's a good one. We'd like to put it in protected mode to start with, but then no one would be able to do anything until they define something in scope and they'd claim it didn't work. So we can't do that. So we have standard mode, which just means, yeah, you can do anything all the time. Then we have this new mode, which is attack mode. And what attack mode does, it kind of follows you. So rather than, what you normally do is you explore the application, maybe use the spider, and then do the active scan. But what the attack mode does is it kind of follows you. So as soon as you find new contents of your website, it starts attacking them. So it's a kind of ongoing active scan. And that means it kind of follows you around the site. So you can actually just choose to attack particular things and ignore whole areas of the site. And that way you can focus on particular areas and not go down to the admin side or whatever bits you don't want to do. And the last thing I'd like to show in 2.4.0 is we have this new dialog for fuzzing. So we did have, we've had a fuzzer before, and that allowed you to fuzz one particular string at one time, and it allowed you to choose which of the files of attack vectors that you would use, which is all well and good, but it was a little bit restrictive, and we've had some user surveys, and this is the thing that most people have requested that we enhance. So we now have these fuzz locations, so you can actually go in and say, right, this particular string there, I want to fuzz that, and then you can choose the payloads. So you can say, right, a file, I want to choose one particular file as kind of one-off thing, and you can say what the comments are, a load of options around that. You can choose the file fuzzers, so these are the files of fuzz attacks that we've got built in or that you've added via add-ons, and you can choose as many of these as you like, so you can select a whole range of those. We also have regex expressions. So you can put a regex expression. This is experimental. We do know of a couple of problems with this, so use this with care. But we have strings, so you can just have a set of strings, new line, separated, so you can just paste a load of attacks in there if you want. And we also have scripts. And this is very important because what we try and do is make ZAP as scriptable as possible. So you can now write a script which generates payloads. And that script can do whatever you like, and it's supported any of the languages that ZAP supports, so JavaScript, and we've got things like Python and Ruby, Python and JRuby, but because ZAP uses the JavaScripting, any of the JSR 223 languages you should be able to use. And then what you can do, so what you can actually do is you can define as many of these things you want, and you can have multiple payloads. So you can have, write a load of strings, and then I want to choose one of these sets of files, and you can add those. And once you've done that, so you can actually go in and you can define processors. So what the processors are is these actually process the either the attack payload. So the attack payload, you can do things like encoding and decoding, escaping, unescaping, a whole load of things that you can apply to the payloads, and also scripts. So we've got script processors, so you can write a script that will change the payload in any way. So you've got a custom app which has some weird encoding. You can write a script for that, and then you can make sure that all of the attacks are encoded in the right way. So we have a huge amount of options there, and it's really powerful. I think it's only limited by your imagination. If there's anything in there that that isn't supported and you think should be, let us know, and we'll be very happy to add it in. We've got loads of options, so a number of threads, a delay if you find out you're DDoSing or DOSing your application, lots of things there, and different, whether you go depth first or breadth first. And we've also got message processors. So not only can you use scripts to generate the payloads, scripts to manipulate and encode and decode the payloads, we can also add message processors, and we've got some built-in ones. So things like detecting that the attack's been reflected, updating the content length, and scripts as well. So you can actually write scripts which manipulate the messages. So this means the scripts will get invoked both on the request and response. You will have full access to everything. You can make any changes you like. So this is exceedingly powerful, and we think it is. There's loads of fun things, and I would love to see some people come up with some fun scripts. So please play around with this and let us know if there's anything missing, anything wrong, or if you come up with some cool scripts. And we've got the community scripts, which, so just send us pull requests. So that was a quick overview of version 2.4.0. One thing I haven't mentioned is the API changes. So we have this REST API, and there's loads more you can do with the API. The idea is once you'll be able to use the API for pretty much everything that ZAP can do. So you can now kick off. You've always been able to start the Spider and Active Scanner, but now you can start multiple ones of those and have them running concurrently. But there's loads more features you can access via the API. And if there's anything missing, then let us know and we'll put it in. And lots of minor enhancements and bug fixes. Have a look at the release notes fully for the full list. So there are a few other new things. So we've got some new alpha add-ons. One I'm particularly excited about is access control testing. And this is something one of our core developers has been working on for quite a few years, actually. And it's all about testing, the automated testing of access control. And that is possible to some extent if your application understands things like you have to understand authentication, session handling, users, but ZAP understands all of those things. If you tell ZAP how these things work, then you'll be able to, ZAP will actually understand how these things work, and you'll be able to do, ZAP will be able to crawl the application and understand the differences between users, and then do the attacks based on the different users between them. So we actually can automate a whole load of access control testing. There's sequence scanning, which means you can actually, have, if you've got pages, if you've got wizards, which you have to go through page 1, page 2, page 3, we can actually make sure that you attack page 3 properly by going through the first few pages. And I mentioned there the community scripts, which allow you to, which anyone can contribute to. So we want to build up a great resource there of fun things. So, what's next? One thing I don't normally talk about things that are coming up because it's a little bit risky, particularly an open source project and contributors don't know what's going to happen. But I want to make a change this time. There will be more of the same. So, we've got a bug fix release coming out soon. Soon, I said, I'm not going to give a date. We'll see. There's nothing critical we've got to fix. We know a few things. It'll be within the next few weeks, probably. Then we're going to have new improved active and passive scan rules. People are working on those. New and improved add-ons. There'll be some fun things coming along soon. We are migrating to GitHub. This is painful. We were on Google Code, which is shutting down. So GitHub, we're going to be getting there, but that takes a while. We'll probably have to adopt a dependency management tool as well. So that's all well and good, but nothing too surprising. But I did say, said on Twitter that I did want to announce something. So I don't want to disappoint. And what I want to talk about is a new direction for ZAP. And the reason for this direction is we want to make sure that ZAP works as well as possible in all situations. And we've had some requests for things where ZAP doesn't really cope with that well at the moment. And this new direction is something we're calling internally ZAS, ZAP as a service. So what we want to do is instead of having ZAP as a desktop tool, to put it on the servers. And I want to stress that this is not a replacement. We're not getting rid of the desktop ZAP, as I'm now calling it. Desktop ZAP will carry on, and it will be a really big focus for us, and most people carry on using desktop ZAP, hopefully. But we want a new way of running ZAP, and that is running ZAP as a service. So what does this really mean? What are the implications? Well, one of the things is a load of the ZAP functionality will just work. So, all of the active scan, passive scan rules, they don't care where they're running. A lot of the ZAP functionality will be common across these two things. Let's think about the properties of what I'm now calling desktop ZAP. We have a local HSQL DB, which is all well and good. It's great, you don't have to install it, but it's all very good for a desktop tool. We build up data structures in the database and in memory. So, all things like the sites tree, that's completely in memory. And those kind of things you want for a desktop tool where you're seeing, the tree scrolling and things, a fast UI. That's very necessary. Got one process on a single machine, one user, super user essentially for the application, and you access it via Swing UI or the API. And we typically expect ZAP to be running for a matter of minutes, hours, but days, weeks is not too likely. And the license is Apache v2. It means you can take ZAP and you can do whatever you want with it, which is all well and good. So, ZAP as a service. What's the difference between that and desktop ZAP? Well, the first thing is we need an enterprise database, something, MySQL, something like that, but something big and robust. We need to make sure that all the data structures are built up in the database. None of the big ones are built up in memory, because that just doesn't scale. We want multiple processes. We want that to be distributed. We want multiple users and multiple roles, so a hierarchy of roles within ZAP, so different people can have different permissions and different target applications. The access will be via a web UI as well as the API. So that's going to be a big change for us. And the application lifetime. This is the big one. What we're aiming for is 5 nines compatibility. Now, for those of you who haven't heard the term before, 5 nines is a term given to an uptime of 99.99%. That means in 1 year you're allowed 5 minutes downtime. That's quite big. That's quite a big change from a desktop tool that we're used to running for a matter of hours. That's a huge change. So, there's a lot of work here, but particularly the lifetime thing is massive. So I don't want to underestimate the amount of work that's going to be involved here. There's a lot of things to do. And I want to, people have pointed out to me, it's like, do you really know what you're doing? And that's a very good question. But my answer is, I still think of myself as new to application security. I've been doing it for like 5 years now. I'm still learning a lot. Learning a lot in everything, of course. But what I used to do before this, I was a developer, and I designed, I implemented, and in some cases I ran systems like this. So bizarrely, this is actually me getting back to my comfort zone. So I've got, I think I know what's required. It's a lot of work. And the last thing is the license. Apache v2. This means you can do what you like with it. You can take ZAP as a service, you can put it online, you can charge for it. That's fine. We're cool with that. So, what do we actually need to do? We need to introduce a database independence layer. HSQLDB is actually really good for the desktop. There's no point in, we don't want to say you've got to install MySQL or something. So we want to be able to switch between databases, config, but we also want to definitely support MySQL as well as other things. We want a low memory option. And again, this is something you probably won't want to the desktop, but for on the server, you definitely want to build everything up within database tables, essentially. Want a multi-process option. Again, on the desktop, we'll stick with one process probably, but we want these distributed processes across multiple, multiple servers, multiple, a whole range of different data centers, things like that. And we want to support multiple users and roles, which is another biggie. And there's a whole load of things, scheduling and managing sessions, and there's massive things in there. And we need to develop a web UI. So that's pretty significant. And we're going to need a full security review. We try and make sure that desktop ZAP is secure for ZAP users, but we're well aware that it's a tiny target compared with an online service. People are really going to have a hard go at that. It's got all the vulnerabilities for your company. We definitely want to make sure that this is as secure as possible. So there are a lot of changes in there. I don't want to pretend that it's very quick. This will take us a long time. I'm not going to give you any estimate when we're going to complete, because it depends how many people can get involved, how quickly they can work. And if you want to get involved, please get in touch. But we have done some of this already. So version 2.4.0 has the database independence layer. It doesn't, there's only one implementation, which is the original Paros HSQLDB implementation. But in the trunk, we have another implementation. We have a second implementation, which is a generic SQL layer. And that supports MySQL as well as HSQLDB. And at some point, we'll be changing over to that. So all we've done is we've taken all the SQL statements, we've extracted those into property files, so you can actually just change the syntax of the SQL to match your database, and then you'll support that database. And we also have support for the low memory option in the core. So this means that the main data structures we can build up in the database, in particular the sites tree. So the sites tree did just build up all of the sites, and every node would just carry on building up. That is now, we can build that up in the database rather than in memory. For desktop ZAP, you probably want it in memory still. But we now have this option, so you can actually run ZAP in a low memory option, probably with the APIs better. You can run it with the UI, you just don't get the sites tree now. And before we get too excited, I'm not going to go anymore. We haven't done anything else. But one thing, you don't actually have to worry about, it's not a big bang where we say, right, you can't use anything until we've actually finished the whole lot. Things like MySQL support could actually be really useful for the desktop app. I actually use it quite a bit myself. We had this ZAP summit yesterday. We suddenly had a thought that we could actually have multiple desktop ZAPs all talking to the same MySQL server. So if you've got multiple pen testers all working on the same applications, you can share the database, you can see what the other people are doing. So, there's features which will bleed across into desktop ZAP, and there'll be cases where you can actually use these things before ZAP as a service is complete. So the low memory option would be ideal. If you're just using the ZAP API, then, through ThreadFix or Minion or through other tools, you can start using the low memory option even though we haven't got multiple processes. And we can start using MySQL across multiple desktops even though we don't have multi-process. So there's a lot of things that will be coming, and they're already there, you can start making use of. And that is everything I've got to say. So, who's got the first question?
What is the main motivation to move to this ZAP service? Is it from some user feedback?
Yes. Yeah. So we've had feedback from users, and actually in Mozilla, we want to use it as well. So we want to set up a ZAP as a service so that all of our developers and QA people can use that. So we want an online service for Mozilla, and we also, we recognize that other users want to do the same kind of thing. So this is something I said you could set up within your company, or you could put it on the internet and start charging for it. That's fine. Any more questions?
About policies, when I use ZAP, I'm always looking for policies, trying to customize policies.
Yeah.
Policies customization. I remember it was a policy about OWASP top 10. This is not OWASP top 10, right?
We've not had one of those. I think the top 10 is, it's kind of, if you ever see online a web scanner saying, we detect the top 10, they're lying. The top 10 is, it's more conceptual, and there are certain things like injection attacks, but some of the other ones, some of the session handling, and it's like, things like whether things are encrypted in the database. Well, you can't usually tell that unless your application is particularly buggy, how data is encrypted in the database. So there's a lot of things that you can't detect automatically. We could have a kind of top 10, but it would be limited. There's certain ones of the top 10 that are so difficult, so in some cases so wide-ranging, like misconfiguration. That covers such a multitude of sins, and some of the session handling in the top 10. It's like, well, there's so many things that could cover. So we could come up with a kind of nearly top 10 policy, but at the moment we haven't. But if anyone, I kind of think it's you tune it to your applications. So what's probably good, if you've got an application you're scanning regularly, scan that application, and then, if there's certain things where, particularly technology, or if your application doesn't do certain things, you don't have to use those rules. There's no point in, as I said, testing for Windows vulnerabilities if you're not using Windows. And then things like, there's certain things you really want to test for, so you might test for cross-site scripting at a high level. Some ones where you get some false positives, you can actually put turn that down a bit. So it's really for tuning to particular applications or particular things you're looking for. So you might say, right, when a developer checks things in, we're doing a continuous integration scan, I just want to run these 3 rules, and then we'll do the full set afterwards. Or the attack mode. You can actually have a separate policy for the attack mode. So rather than do everything, you just want to hit it with a few attacks just so you get the injection attacks maybe. That might be a good one. So it's tuning it to how you'd like. But if you come up with really great policies you think other people will be interested in, post them to the user group or something like that. Tell us, and we can build up a list of these things. It'd be great. But I don't know how easy it is to come up. We try and have the default values sensible. Will someone come up with a policy that's really applicable to loads of other users? If so, great, and we'll publicize it. Yeah, but if we can come up with templates, we're really happy to include them with ZAP. So if you come up with some useful ones, let us know. And the scripts, actually, so the community scripts are organized in certain ways. If you install those, if you pull those down from GitHub, you can actually point ZAP to them, and all of those will get imported. So you can import collections of scripts. So you can have, if you've got a pen test company, you've got a load of your own scripts, you could have those in another repo, a private one maybe, pull those from there, and all of those will get added to ZAP. So you can do something like that as well. Any other questions? Yeah.
If you would want to release ZAP as a service next year at the same time as this conference, what would be the amount of work and people involved to get this done?
No, I'm not going down there. It's a lot of work, and it's going to be iterative. When it comes down to it, Mozilla sponsored me to work on ZAP. Most of my work is on ZAP. I've now found out a few other companies are sponsoring their employees to work on ZAP. But I spend a lot of my time. They spend a very small amount of the time. Most of the ZAP people are contributors and doing it in their own time. So sometimes they can spend decent amounts. Sometimes something will happen, family events or something, a change in circumstance, and suddenly they can't contribute at all. So it's really difficult to do it. If I had a team of half a dozen people working full time, then I think I'd be able to give you a better idea. But I don't, so I'm going to sidestep that question. Good question, but very difficult for me to answer. But what we're trying to do is do features at a time. As I said, do features which you can actually make use of. So I'm going to be publicizing soon how you can actually use MySQL, because I use ZAP with MySQL sometimes on my Linux box. So, and that's it. Then you actually have all the sessions in one database. So that can, things like having these multiple desktops all talking to the same database and then sharing information. We can implement that before the full ZAP as a service, and that will be really useful. So we're trying to do things one step at a time and have useful things, but things people can use in anger. No more questions? All right, I will be around afterwards, and I'll be here for the rest of the conference, so please come up. If you're using ZAP, come up and let me know. If you've got any suggestions or criticism, things we could do better, please let me know. Thank you very much.